Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is Laura Belanger from the National Weather Service Atlanta, and this is the special weather briefing for Hurricane Ian. We did one yesterday. Thank you again for joining us today, and we are expected to continue these through the week. So as of this morning, the latest NHC track has both shifted the position of landfall on the Florida Peninsula a little bit further south, but then has also sped up and kind of kept the track a little bit further east as it moves north into North Florida and then into Georgia, with the potential for it to really sort of ride that Georgia coastline there as it moves northward over Augusta. Now, it is a Category 3 hurricane right now. It is expected to make landfall as a major hurricane late on Wednesday this week. Any real changes in the forecast could spell some significant changes for us as far as the impacts expected to North and Central Georgia. So it is worth watching as we continue to update the forecast through the week. As of right now, our latest track is still producing concerning long-duration wind gusts over Georgia, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth here in a few slides. And then we're also expecting rainfall amounts of 3+ inches almost statewide, and we'll talk on that as a moment. Okay, so again, as of this morning, it is a Category 3 hurricane with max winds of 115 miles per hour. The minimum central pressure actually increased a little bit as it came off the coast of Cuba there. Now sitting over the ocean, it's about 963 millibars, and it's moving north at about 10 miles per hour. Now, there is still quite a bit of uncertainty with the forecast track. So the Hurricane Center did just update that at 11 a.m. And so unfortunately, the image on the far left there is looking at the previous one. And what we're looking at here is a wide variety of solutions depending on which model you're looking at. And so while we have good confidence in the Hurricane Center's forecast and model uncertainty is really low as we get into midweek and into Thursday, beyond that, there's still a big question mark as to how this is going to evolve as it moves northward and approaches the state of Georgia. So, don't spend too much time looking at those two images on the left. That's just mainly to show that the track uncertainty is still there as we get into the later portions of the week. However, that being said, there is some better agreement with the actual storm intensity forecast between these models, with maybe major hurricane status holding on initially for the first 2 days, but then dropping very quickly to tropical storm status or lower thereafter, which is a good sign. Okay, now for the state of Georgia, as far as our impacts are concerned, our main focus right now is on wind speeds. So you see these images tossed around a lot. They get posted on the Hurricane Center page. This is valuable information to use, particularly with understanding your risk of those tropical related winds. And so we've included it here. This is the potential for, or the probability of tropical storm force winds for the next 5 days. So you can see the zoomed in image there on the bottom right. Portions of southeast Georgia have a 50 to 60% chance of seeing that greater than 40 mile per hour wind speed. And then as we move north and west into the state of Georgia, that gets to be about 20 to 30% as we're approaching the metro Atlanta area. Now, one big caveat with this is that the focus for these images is to express the probability of tropical winds. And in this case, we're actually seeing the potential for some pressure gradient winds. And so we'll talk about that in a minute, but don't get too caught up in your risk here for those tropical winds. Now, as far as the estimated timing of when these tropical winds might show up, this is looking at the earliest reasonable arrival time for these wind speeds. Again, this is a 5-day forecast graphic. It's going to keep updating each day. And so as of right now, based on the latest forecast, it's showing that Savannah might start to see these wind speeds as early Thursday, Columbus late Wednesday, Macon early Thursday, Atlanta late on Thursday, and then North Georgia early Friday. So we are, as this track continues and the storm moves northward, that those timings do spread northward as well, and that makes sense. Now, one of the things that we've been looking at here is this very unique setup with this storm. For those of you who maybe have a little bit of a weather nerd in you and you remember Irma from 2017, you might remember that this situation, the way this one is currently forecast to evolve, is very similar to how Irma was evolving. And so we've included this surface map of Irma's location there on the right side of the screen, and then we've got the forecast map for Friday morning for Ian on the left side of the screen. And what I want to draw your attention to is the position of this high pressure ridge over the Northeast. It extends down the Appalachian Mountains, and it provides this pressure gradient over North Georgia or the Carolinas. Now, one of the things not to get caught up in here is the number of lines that you're seeing. It's actually a similar pressure gradient, maybe not quite as strong, but very close, even though Ian's map doesn't quite have as many lines on it. And so because of this pressure gradient, we are looking for higher wind speeds to occur away from the storm over North Georgia. And so when we look back to see what actually happened with Irma in 2017, that's this map that we're seeing on the right here. And so these were higher gradient winds that were observed over North Georgia. Even the Atlanta airport saw a gust to 64 miles per hour. Up over Northeast Georgia near the topography, it was in the 40s and 50s. And so this just gives you a general idea of how these winds are a little bit more displaced from where the center of the storm is located. And now if we compare that to the forecast of what we're expecting with Ian, we're seeing something very similar. So Southeast Georgia might see gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour. As we move northwest into the metro Atlanta area, 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts, and then slightly lower as we get into the Northwest Georgia sector. Okay, so maybe not surprisingly, but a little caveat here, these winds may still be underdone based on what we're seeing in the models. So this is what's currently in our forecast, but this may still be, a little low compared to what some of these model solutions are providing for the state of Georgia. Now, when we're looking at the duration of these wind gusts, even though Ian is expected to move into Georgia as a weaker storm, that pressure gradient begins to set up as early as maybe Thursday. And so we're seeing these kind of gusty winds that could be prolonged from Thursday, particularly in Southeast Georgia, all the way through Saturday. And so we want to really highlight that this could be a big high impact risk for us, a high impact hazard. So that's going to bring down trees, the potential for extended power outages, just mainly because you can't put people out there to make repairs or fixes. And then in addition to that, with wet soils across the area, that could actually exacerbate the number of trees that we see down because of these wind speeds. Now, also a little caveat to this, any tracks that would pull the center of the storm further over the Atlantic or just generally east, further east, would mean that this pressure gradient then sets up over South Carolina and not over Georgia. And so that could really change the kind of forecast max wind gust that we see. Now, as another note here, because these winds are pressure gradient winds and not tied specifically to the tropical storm, or the tropical nature of this storm, any wind hazard products that we issue would be considered non-tropical. So that means we wouldn't necessarily issue a tropical storm warning for these kind of wind speeds. We might instead issue a wind advisory or a high wind warning. So just be advised, even though because of this environment, we do have a tropical feature in it, it doesn't mean that we're going to be issuing tropical related products to address these wind hazards. Okay, now moving from winds to rainfall, this is the current Weather Prediction Center forecast for rainfall totals for days 1 through 7. So most of this is going to be occurring Thursday through Sunday as Ian moves north over the area and then exits late on Saturday into Sunday. Even on its current forecast track, the rainfall amounts over our area are generally 3 to 3.5 across a good portion of the state. And then you're looking at 3 to 5 inches over the southeast portions of the state. And even areas that aren't in that 3+ range, they're still seeing at least 2. And so that's going to be over North Georgia and along the western state line. Our flood risk in this case is relatively low. That's aided by the fact that we have been dry over the last several days into the last week or so. And so we can handle a good amount of this rainfall. The problem will be if it comes in a very quick burst with a tropical band that comes through. But as of right now, we're just not anticipating that. So the flooding risk, while low, is actually highest over southeast Georgia and something we'll continue to watch over the next couple of days. Now, if we were to summarize our hazards by day, looking at this, our damaging wind threat could start as early as Wednesday for gusts of 20 miles per hour to about 30 miles per hour. And then they increase Thursday and Friday with our highest wind speeds right now, our highest wind gusts right now being 40 mile per hour plus in southeast Georgia and then potentially in northeast Georgia with those gradient winds. And then that starts to taper off on Saturday and then again into Sunday. I can't hit home this point enough. This could lead to the highest impact for this situation, this event as it moves through. We have the potential for those power outages to be a concern, down trees because of wet soils, the pure nature of this evolving over a several day period of time with these kind of wind speeds could be a major issue for the area. As far as heavy rainfall is concerned, while it could start on Thursday south of I-20, the most amount of rainfall is expected to fall on Friday and then begin tapering off on Saturday based on a lot of the models that we're seeing. Right now, our tornado risk is really low. If anything, it would be Friday and Saturday and something we can continue to monitor. And our flooding seems, that risk seems really isolated to the southeast Georgia area there on Friday and Saturday associated with the highest rainfall amounts. Okay, so I'll leave this summary slide up here for a minute and just remind you that, this is an evolving situation. The forecast is updating every 3 hours from the Hurricane Center. Any changes in the track forecast could mean a big impact change for us as far as what we are calling for the state of Georgia. But as of right now, our wind gusts over Georgia remain the biggest concern for us in conjunction with those 3 inches of rainfall or more across the state. Okay, our next special webinar briefing is going to be tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. I believe Dave will be hosting that again tomorrow. And I'm going to take a few minutes now to address some of your questions. The current wind forecast for sustained winds for central Georgia, I can get somebody on that. And the fire danger risk for North Georgia Wednesday and Thursday. I can get somebody on that as well. Were there other questions that we can include here on the...
A day for the sustained?